The title of this keynote is Civilian Invisibilities, Drone Violence, Telewarriors, and Biopolitics. It is also the title of my forthcoming thesis. The title and its meaning will become evident throughout the course of this keynote. But first, I want you to imagine you're a member of a United States Air Force drone crew. Your crew has been assigned surveillance over a convoy of 3 SUVs traveling through the Afghan countryside in the early hours of the morning. Now, intercepted radio communications have indicated that there may be a high-value individual present in the area. Additionally, a small detachment of friendly troops is deployed in a nearby town. Your crew speculate that this convoy could be a potential hostile force preparing to attack the town where friendly troops are deployed. Now, you want to protect your own troops. The vehicles are seen flashing their lights, potentially signaling one another. They also make several direction changes, potentially engaging in what is known as tactical maneuvering, which under your rules of engagement is a demonstration of hostile intent. The convoy halts at a compound, and your fellow crew member remarks, "Screener said at least one child near SUV." To which your sensor replies, "Bullshit! Where? Send me a fucking still. I don't think they have kids out at this hour. I know they're shady, but come on." Your crew are not convinced that these are children. Maybe they're teenagers. Maybe they're short adults. The convoy halts once again. This time, around 24 people dismount. They lay mats on the floor and begin to pray. It's around 6:18 in the morning, time for morning prayer in the Islamic faith. Your crew continue to speculate. This is definitely it. This is their force. Praying? I mean, seriously, that's what they do. To which the mission intelligence coordinator replies, "They're gonna do something nefarious." It is here that we arrive at the research problem that my thesis addresses. How are performances of civilianhood understood by drone crews? How are direction changes seen as tactical maneuvering? How is prayer seen as a preparation for a violent jihad? How are children seen as teenagers, then adults, and then as hostile combatants? The reality is that such actions are, on the contrary, performances of civilianhood. My thesis seeks to investigate how this gaze is constructed for telewarriors who enact violence from behind screens and through data. As such, I'm investigating how scopic regimes are constructed. Film theorist Christian Metz's theory of scopic regimes contests that the assumption that vision is universal is perhaps problematic. Rather, he considers vision as constructed by forces like culture or technology. I want to problematize the assumption that such military personnel, drone crews, can accurately delineate between civilians and combatants within the context of drone violence. I seek to identify how power augments the scopic field and produces civilian invisibilities. Now, for those of you who are unaware, telewarriors are a new soldier born out of the proliferation of unmanned systems at the dawn of the 21st century. So telewarriors are therefore military personnel who access the battle space remotely through some form of technological mediation. Now, my research question consists of 3 sub-questions. Firstly, how are telewarriors apprehended within a scopic regime? Secondly, how does this scopic regime orient the gaze of telewarriors? And finally, does this scopic regime render civilian bodies and performances of civilianhood invisible to telewarriors? Now, advocates of lethal drone use, particularly in the United States, position the military practice as efficient, ethical, and surgical. The reality is far less so. Between 2004 and 2015, approximately 964 civilians were killed by US drone strikes In Pakistan alone, drone violence continues under the Trump administration, but because they're so damn shady, we know so little of the civilian cost. Drone violence is a site of comprehensive scholarly inquiry. So I'm only going to review literature which pertains to my research area, because if I did review all the literature, we'd probably be here for the next day. Now, a signature strike, the specific form of drone violence which I'm investigating, is prosecuted by what is known as a patterns of life analysis, which demarcates behavior as either suspicious or benign. The voices of the racial other are effaced. This effacement predates drone violence. Edward Said's concept of Orientalism describes the hegemony in which the West discursively constructs the racial other. Scholars have identified that drone violence is enabled by both a racist construction of the other and the extraction of sovereign power from the judicial realm. This racism, according to Joseph Pugliese, is predicated on a speciesist hierarchy of life, which constructs the racial other as a non-human animal. Constructing the racial other as animal life facilitates their subsequent disavowal from a human rights-bearing subjectivity. Now, Joseph Pugliese names this phenomenon ratio-speciesism. Through drone violence, the racial other is hunted like an animal. The United States, the cheeky bastards, also engage in legal posturing that allows them to enact sovereign power, which, simply put, is the power that the state enacts over the life and death of its subjects through extrajudicial means. Now, as an example, the US defines a combatant, who is a legitimate target who can be killed in war, as all military-aged males killed in a strike zone, explicit evidence posthumously proving them innocent. Now, this legal posturing clearly violates the right to trial and the presumption of innocence, which is at the core of the global justice system. It results in what poststructuralist theorist Giorgio Agamben names a state of exception. Derek Gregory surmises a state of exception as one in which a particular group of people is knowingly and deliberately exposed to death through the political, juridical removal of legal protections. Now, the cumulative effect of this racist construction of the other, combined with the extrication of sovereign power from the judicial realm, is the formulation of what Giorgio Agamben names bare life. So bare life, simply put, refers to human life, which exists only in the sense that it is biologically human, but has had all legal protections normally afforded to them removed. Such can be said about the people, or the victims rather, of drone violence. Thus, prior research has evidenced that racism and the extrication of sovereign power from the judicial realm enables the production of a state of exception, bare life, and subsequently the normalization of drone violence against civilians. My research seeks to reorient the focus to those who prosecute drone strikes, telewarriors, rather than those who prosecute them. I want to consider how racisms and mediation co-constitute a regime of power and visuality, which augments the telewarrior's vision, scopic field, and constitutes a scopic regime. I claim that this scopic regime recodes performances of civilianhood into evidence of hostility and threat. Now, as for the disciplinary or scholarly identity of this thesis, like most cultural studies scholarship, it is thoroughly interdisciplinary. I draw upon diverse fields, including post-colonial studies, critical race theory, post-structuralist philosophy, media studies, and critical studies on terrorism. Now, as my investigation concerns itself with power and subjectivity, I'm utilizing post-structuralism as an epistemological and ontological framework. I will deploy critical discourse analysis as a methodology for this investigation. Now, briefly, critical discourse analysis focuses on unweaving the forces which produces truths, normalizes certain identities, actions, and practices, whilst marginalizing others. I'm also utilizing a case study to evidence my argument, which is known as the Uruzgan strike, which I previewed in my introduction. Now, Gregory has identified a gap in prior scholarship which addresses the Uruzgan strike. Now, previous scholarly work only uses the original radio communications transcript between the drone crew, full motion video screeners, and the ground troops as evidentiary material to reconstruct what happened that day. Now, in a 2018 keynote, Gregory introduces additional evidence, such as the military's investigative officers report, which includes previously classified transcripts and interviews. Now, additionally, in order to empower the voice of the silenced racial other, I will utilize interviews of survivors conducted by filmmaker Sonia Kennebeck for her documentary National Bird, therefore addressing the gap that previous studies have left. The case study will be followed by 2 chapters. Each chapter will examine one of the 2 stipulated apparatuses of power which augment the scopic field of telewarriors and constitute a scopic regime. The first chapter will examine how racisms augment the vision of telewarriors, and the second chapter will ask how the drone, which I consider an interactive digital medium, serves as an apparatus and facilitates the construction of a scopic regime in which telewarriors cannot register performances of civilianhood as evidence of civilianhood and instead recode them as suspicious and hostile actions. Now, it's very easy to plot beyond the scope of a 20,000 word thesis, as surprising as that may seem. So in order to restrict myself, I'm going to focus on a single case study, the Uruzgan strike, and specific junctures within that case study. I acknowledge that, yes, the case study is an event that occurred 9 years ago during the Obama administration. Nonetheless, it is still relevant because signature strikes persist in the Trump administration in their various shadow wars and declared wars in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Somalia, and Yemen. It is the most suitable case study because there is such a wealth of primary and secondary evidence. As a contribution to my research area, I want to produce a generalizable theoretical model which stipulates how a scopic field is constituted and how vision and the gaze of telewarriors is apprehended by a scopic regime. I want to bring greater attention to the forces which construct civilian lives as expendable and expose the contradictions and violence of the United States foreign policy in its disastrous and hypocritical war on terror. Thank you.